Hey guys, let's go ahead and talk squatting. So last week I did just a small video on just some basics of sumo pulling. Today we're going to go over the back squat. A lot of people have trouble when moving from maybe front squatting or goblet squatting to their first setup at a back squat. Charlie did a video a few weeks ago on how to properly unrack the bar. Today I'm just going to show you how to really sit into your hips, and then a couple things that people I find do wrong, because I'll notice that after training people and getting them used to squatting with a goblet, moving them into a bar, it's all of a sudden almost like it's foreign to them. So they might load their hips differently, and they just get very distracted by the movement. So to start off, just like Charlie said in the video, you're going to unrack by getting straight under the bar. I personally like a 3-step drop, and then I'm ready to squat. And so right off the bat, the first thing I do is you notice that I get my shelf going, I get my lats engaged, and I go into a little bit of extension, I start to brace, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull myself down into the squat. Okay, and now what I want to point out, that's the most important part, is the initial posterior weight shift, because that sets the grounds for the rest of the movement. A lot of people you will see who try to either way over-exaggerate this or go without shifting their weight back. If you don't shift your weight back correctly, then you are starting from a very well, you're just starting off wrong, so the whole movement's going to be messed up. So if you watch again, I do that slight posterior weight shift, and then I pull myself into the bottom. You'll notice at the bottom I stay tight. I don't have any rounding going on. A lot of people will squat too low, and you'll see their sacrum start to tuck. The key to this is to actually pull yourself into the ground. So I'm using my hip flexors to pull myself in this position. I'm also spreading the floor with my feet, so it's going to keep my knees out. You really can't tell what my knees are doing from this position, but I am staying tight to really stabilize that whole pelvis. I'm also staying braced. I don't have weight on the bar, but when you have weight on the bar, you want to stay braced, and I'm keeping a neutral spine. So I pull myself down, I feel all the tension getting loaded in my hips, and then to get back up, I drive through my heels, and I come through. And then full motion. Alright, now, a common problem that people have is they don't posteriorly weight shift. Some people will actually take it to the extreme, and you go into a lot of commercial gyms, and you'll see individuals who might squat something like this. Now, I automatically sit back into this position just because I'm already wearing my squat shoes. They're kind of going to push me in that position. And I just am not used to squatting very knee dominant, so I naturally fall back. This people can get away with squatting like this, but the sheer forces you're going to be putting on your knee, you're in a much more quad dominant position, especially if you're going to continue to do this over exaggerated movement. Your quads and your knees are just going to start pulling funny. It's not going to last very long. And so if you go again, you'll also notice when I come out of the hole, it looks a little bit more awkward compared to the original version. Now, the other thing is, from a training standpoint, as to carryover, this isn't going to carry over to a lot more of the athletic movements as the initial one would, because I'm loading my hips in the initial one. I'm getting set in a much more athletic position. With this, you may be able to argue that from a decelerative position that it might be a more sport specific, but again, you're going to be very limited in the long run if you try to train this way. So make sure you're always posteriorly weight shifting. But then the caveat to that is some people will try to overdo that, and this comes from a lot of people who I find have inhibition somewhere in their posterior chain and are trying to make up for it, and so they go into this exaggerated, almost good morning type squat. Oh, not that one. Right here. So a lot of people will start off trying to shift their weight back, and they'll stay hard in the knees. They'll stay locked out here. And they're separating the movement, so you don't have a lot of synchronization between the hips and the knees and the calf. This is a very unathletic movement, and that's actually, if you look at the position that it puts me in, a lot of shear forces start off right at that L5 junction, and going into it, I still drop into a somewhat good position. Now, you'll notice a lot of powerlifters will squat in this very hinge dominant position, but they also time it right. So the issue here isn't that I'm so far into a hinge. The issue here is how most people I see time their squats. So it's that initial break like that. So, if you do go into a hinge dominant position like this, as long as you are making everything move together, you aren't putting as much shear force on one element. But as soon as you try to isolate the movement and into a good morning style squat, that is when issues are going to come about. So the other thing that's going to do is that's really going to drive away your low back. Your low back on that type of squat is usually going to be the limiting factor, whereas the quad dominant style squat that I was showing you where the people don't posterior weight shift, your knees and your legs are going to be the most limiting factor. So once again, you just don't want to you don't want to poke your butt out. And you'll also notice that when people that tend to do this, they go into more extension of the low back, and it's very hard to keep a neutral spine. So there I'm starting to go into almost hyperextension. I'm already a somewhat extended individual, so poking that butt out actually puts me into a place where it's even worse for me. So when you have, especially trainers, if you have an individual who is especially extended, make sure you fix this issue in their squatting if you see it. Like I said, some people, you'll see that they will flare their toes up as they squat. I wrote an article not too long ago about the toes up cue for squatting. If there's inhibition somewhere in this posterior chain, you are going to see that when they actually go to posteriorly weight shift, that they are just not able to coordinate the movement succinctly, and it is going to become an issue. So if you are smart about it, you can train through it, and you can actually figure out where that leak in their chain is, then you can fix it, and then you'll notice that their squat will actually start looking more fluent, and they're able to sit back and time everything correctly. Okay, and then just to show you one more squat, how it should look, everything moves at the same time. Alright, so anybody moving to a barbell, make sure you keep in mind what's going on in this video. Keep in mind what you're doing. Do not be the person to try to watch yourself squatting in a mirror. That's just going to mess you up. Always either record or ask someone to coach you through it.